Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Rob Demain. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called E2E Assure. I'm going to talk to you today around the challenges facing security operations and present a view of the future for us to discuss. I'm going to cover, first of all, the challenges facing security organizations, organizations delivering security operations, and then give you a view of what operations should look like, what the future should be. And then I'm going to sort of reinforce that by showing a demo of an attack scenario. And then at the end, there's going to be some advice and discussion points. So what are the challenges? I think mainly it's all around the skills gap. It's really where the rubber hits the road here in terms of security operations. So internal teams don't have enough people. It's really hard to find the right people, and people move on very quickly. And even for SOC businesses, finding the right staff and keeping them motivated 24/7 is difficult. And really, I think that's the crux of the issue. There's some statistics at the bottom. I'll give you a reference slide at the end that gives you all those references. But effectively, what we're seeing is lots more successful attacks. So the bottom two figures there. One is that ransomware is going up loads, and the other one is it's taking us a long time to detect and respond still. So that's kind of the evidence that this problem exists in this space. For today, the current trend for this audience is really you pick out education and healthcare as being sort of popular targets at the moment. Some might call them easy targets, which basically means that potentially they're areas that the people exploiting organizations think are less well defended, less well resourced in terms of the detect and respond capability. But really, this is a problem facing the industry as a whole, not any particular sector. And fundamentally, the point I'm making really is that the human capacity in cyber is too small, and there's also too many tools, or people are trying to use too many tools and creating too much complexity, which compounds the issue of lack of human capacity. So really the key question is, is your security operation set to deal with today's challenges? When I look back and review kind of how SOCs or security operations were built or focused and how they came to pass historically, it's definitely true to say they were compliance focused, meaning that they were designed to collect logs for audit reasons as much as anything else, focusing on log monitoring and what we call passive detection. So passive detection is where the SOC is only passive. It just looks at stuff and escalates. It can't actually do any defensive operations. And it generally means that a SOC would interact with a service desk or something like that, not with end users or devices in any way. I think traditional SOCs have technology like SIMs. They focus on delivering and installing that technology, and what they don't focus on is actually understanding the business that they're trying to secure and how they might work together with the organization to make them more secure. And they also don't have enough data. So just by going around collecting logs, you often don't have the data. It's very difficult to get organizations to deliver enough logs. And it's often very expensive to do that as well. So some organizations may choose to try and buy some new technology again to try and solve that problem. And that can make things worse by having yet another screen to look at, yet another ton of alerts to look at, etc. What's our view on what a future SOC model should look like? So we think, unless you're a very, very large organization, it's always a hybrid operating model. So we'd say organizations should look for a partner to work with to augment the human resource in this space. And when it comes to technology, we should really focus on less cybersecurity technology, deploying less things to maintain, less things to generate alerts, and trying to make sure that existing technology is leveraged by integrating it with the security operation effectively. We also think that the SOC has a place in user interaction education. I'll try and cover that later on as we go through the demo. And that a SOC should be doing detect and respond. It shouldn't be passive. And you should be looking at metrics such as the time to detect and respond. These things should be measured because it is a race against time. And analysts in the business should all be accessing or viewing the same sort of data through a single pane of glass because a SOC should be trying to enforce or improve the business's cyber security. So today we're going to go through an attack scenario just to make it a bit more interesting and to sort of articulate some of the future SOC principles. So in this demo, What we have here is a supplier SOC at the bottom. They're monitoring Dan on the left, who's working from home on a Windows machine. The SOC are doing that by integrating via an API on a EDR solution that's already been deployed to Dan's machine. So they're not getting logs from Dan. And they're also integrating with an AWS environment, which the customer has told the SOC is important to them, because that's where they run a lot of their services. So the SOC is plugged into AWS APIs and monitoring things like CloudTrail logs, etc. That's the background. At the moment, there's no alerts in the SOC, but it does have visibility of those two aspects. What happens then is on the right, you'll see another first red alert appears in the SOC that says suspicious PowerShell command has been detected. So that is an alert that's been picked up by the SOC from the EDR on Dan's machine, telling the SOC that something strange is happening. It's not that there's a virus or something like that, it's that an anomaly has occurred. It's something needs investigating. It could be normal, could be bad. Maybe Dan's running some PowerShell, maybe it's something nasty running some PowerShell, but the SOC would need to look at that. What the SOC doesn't know is that Dan is being targeted by the attackers. The attackers are trying to obtain some sort of credential for that AWS environment because they want to try and lock the company out and blackmail them over access. So that's what's going on, and somehow they've got something through to Dan. Dan's maybe clicked an email link or something that's doing something. The SOC doesn't know that, they just get a PowerShell alert. So do we think the SOC should then immediately do something about this based on it being a possible attack or maybe not? In this case, we're suggesting that the first action the SOC should do, or the security operation should do, is notify Dan that something's going on because the SOC want to take some action. What the SOC want to do in this case is send a message to Dan, maybe via Teams, through an Office 365 integration, say, hey Dan, we can see you logged onto this machine, we've just detected something strange. We'd like to disable what we call isolate your machine for a period of time so we can investigate it because it might be a threat to the business. So that's our view. So we're going to chat with Dan and let him know we're going to do something just in case he's in the middle of something critical. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit this button to isolate the machine, and we're going to do a partial isolation, which is basically what that's going to do. It's going to allow Dan to continue working in Teams and Outlook, but everything else is going to be restricted to running on his local machine. So it's going to kill his internet access, in this case, kill his access to AWS, and prevent any lateral movement, etc. from happening. Because what that's going to do, it's going to give the SOC time to investigate what might be happening. So to investigate that, you're going to need some skilled people. I'm not going to go through that in full amount of depth here, but what the SOC is doing here is it's invoking virus scans and DAT file updates, whatever it is. It's investigating what's been running on Dan's machine. It's found that something is connecting to a website and downloading a launcher.hda file that's actually a binary. But again, I'm not going to focus on this. It's just the process of analysis takes time and needs skills. And it should be following a playbook, and it can be automated to some extent, but it is going to take time. So the SOC analyst is going through stuff. They're looking at what was sent to and from this web server, between Dan's machine and the web server. They found this HJ file, which is actually a binary. And they're also looking at things like vulnerabilities on Dan's machine. Is there something that an attacker could exploit? And in this case, there's a CVS 9.8 vulnerability on Dan's machine. So the SOC are thinking, okay, there's a vulnerability which is exploitable. There's some sort of payload running, something running, some PowerShell running. It's all not looking great, and it's being linked to a potential theft of web browser information. So now they've determined that something is accessing the web browser credentials in Dan's web browser similar time to this attack. So that really is critical, that they've identified that there was something strange happening, something's been downloaded, and then something's accessed these credentials in the user's web browser. In this case, the credentials are for the AWS environment that Dan was administrating. In this case, we've used some demo credentials here, but we know that something's accessed Dan's in-flight web credentials. So at this point, the SOC are then going to look at the AWS logs, pivot to them, and see if someone's logging in using those credentials right now, and they're going to look for anomalous access. So in this case, they've detected that normally AWS is accessed from the first IP address, but in this case, the last 5 minutes, it's had 3 accesses from a new IP address, this time in Australia. And this now is definitely an incident. There's like a concern that the credentials have been stolen for that AWS account. And then hit the incident button, and we'd go into incident response mode. So effectively, what's happening here is that we think the attacker has potentially compromised those credentials for AWS, and they're now accessing that environment. So what would we do next? This is where we kind of take a step back and think, okay, well, what should the runbook, the playbook say next? Or possibly, or probably we should quickly try and disable that AWS account. So should the SOC have the power to do that, or would they need to interact with the help desk to do that? How that operate? Should we unisolate Dan's machine, or do we need to forensically capture the data on it quickly, do something else? Do we need to then, so assuming we then close down that incident in some way, what were the lessons learnt? What's the review process? What was wrong? Was it that patching was wrong? Was it a fault in patching there? Was it a user training issue? Was it a device hardening problem? Was actually the problem to do with the lack of 2FA or multi-factor on the AWS account? Anyway, there's going to be a collection of lessons learned from that incident, and that should then package back up into runbooks and playbooks. And then we mustn't forget that that was just one piece of an attack. What else will this attacker try? So basically, this should be the start of a feedback loop now to improve the security of the organization, knowing that somebody or something's trying to target our AWS environment. So the key questions or takeaways I've got for this are, really, if you're looking at your own security team, your own security operations, could you detect and respond to an attack like this? Would a traditional SOC compliance-based model, would your current security partner be able to do this? Mainly, if you're thinking about, you've got a monitoring only service, is that really appropriate for the threats that we're facing these days? Even if it may have detected something, would it have responded so quick? Would it have had the context to do this? And then another question I've got is, was it a good idea to engage with Dan during this process quite early on? Or we should have just carried on and not engaged with the end user? But there's plenty of interesting topics we can discuss. But effectively, what we're showing here is what a modern attack looks like, and the fact that it's not particularly a problem that the technology isn't detecting it. It's more that the response isn't capable of doing something about it. So what's our advice? What are the takeaways that we've got for this? If you're looking at building a security operation or improving your own, firstly, really it's got to be a hybrid operating model with a specialist provider, because it's really hard to find people. Look for somebody who's got the focus on people and process, and try and find a trusted partner. Your existing team, they need to be key in this. They've really got an important role to play. They've got the internal knowledge on your network, your domains, your systems. They're key. Your outsourcing or your hybrid model should make sure that they're used the most efficiently as possible, using the expert knowledge that they've got. In terms of processes, what we always like to say is that maybe you shouldn't try and defend everything, and you should assume that everything could be compromised. So really the first thing to do is to try and prioritize what you're trying to defend. In this case, it was the AWS environment, which was the most important thing and the most obvious target for an attacker who wanted to ransom you or bribe you basically for money because they wanted to get your credentials. So had we thought about that when we engaged with the security operation team, we'd have focused on deploying monitoring of that scenario. In terms of technology, really this isn't a silver bullet story. In this example here, we've used one EDR product and an integration with AWS to do all this stuff. That is not a lot of technology, and really that's our message. Less is more when it comes to security technology, but do use cloud-based technology these days, cloud-based EDRs. Make sure you've got MFA set up everywhere and try and make the most possible use of your existing technology. And make sure that your security operation integrates with it and doesn't try to duplicate stuff as well to try and keep costs down. And at the end of the day, we're a specialist SOC provider. We've been doing this many years. We focus on people and process, although we do provide technology in our services. And I think it's a key lesson I want to sort of put across today is that focus on the people and process aspect, however you're going to build your operation, not so much on the technology. Here's the references that we talked about earlier. There'll be a Q&A later on. I look forward to speaking to you later.